Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Pluribus Season 1 Episode 3. It's called Grenade. So spoilers for the episode as always, and yes, I did have to think for a split second what the title of the show was, because Pluribus is a weird word. But yes, welcome. Obviously really enjoyed the first two episodes last week, was curious to see what they were going to do this time, and it's a bit more low-key. This episode, it's not as bombastic with as big things happening, although the ideas that are introduced by the end potentially could be very big. Once Carol's just floating the idea of asking for an atomic bomb of some kind. But yeah, this was a lot more of like her settling into what life is now and kind of coming to realize certain things. The tail off from what last episode ended with is that she did go and get Zosha, or pirate lady, and she's on the plane with her, and there's a lot of kind of awkward kind of spatial comedy beats of her sticking her head out and Zosha coming up to ask her if she needs anything or sending her away, but then calling her back and she has to make the same walk all the way back up the aisle to the back of the plane, so on and so on. They also have the little bit here that they've got actual pilots, or at least the bodies that are inhabited here were actual pilots to try and make Carol feel better, which doesn't actually make her feel better, but that's kind of what their intent seems to have been. And Carol starts asking about the other people who don't speak English that are still themselves, and they're all kind of lost causes. Some sound too old, some sound like they're still children, but the final one, the one they didn't know about at first, the one that it took like 30 hours to discover, the guy in Paraguay, she wants to talk to him and ends up trying to call him on the phone, even though she can't speak that much Spanish, but tries to anyway, and he keeps hanging up. He yells at her finally and then hangs up after he yells at her, so she dials back again just to yell at him and then hangs up, which I actually think may be an important little detail, because that kind of sets up the idea from his perspective that maybe he was talking to a real person. Because these people, the hive mind, don't talk like that. So I suspect that might lead to why he ultimately might want to come and talk to Carol at some point, or at least agree for her to come and see him. But we'll see. Obviously, the way that he's so closed off and the way that they didn't find him for 30 hours makes me think he's some kind of prepper who's in a bunker somewhere and he's like really insulated and he's keeping an eye on everything or something. I don't know. But that's the vibe that it gives me. So maybe he's going to try and learn some English or something before he meets Carol. Or maybe Carol will try and spruce up her Spanish. Now, of course, I did gloss over the cold open. Emphasis on cold. It's a very cold open, in fact. It's a flashback scene to some time ago with Carol and Helen, where they go to this weird... I actually thought this was a dream sequence for a little bit, because I'm like, surely this doesn't exist. Surely this is not a real thing. Where you go underground in the ice in Norway, I think they said, and you sleep on a nice of bed, and everything's made out of ice, and you're freezing the entire time. The rooms are like -3 Celsius. Like, what the hell? Surely this would just make everyone ill if they tried to live down here. Maybe I'm wrong. Clearly, I'm not an expert. But they see the northern lights like through the window up on the skylight, and I think for me the main thing about this scene, other than giving us another glimpse at their relationship, because obviously Helen was taken from us in episode 1, so we don't really, we didn't get that much of a chance to get to know her, right, in the grand scheme of things. We're mostly learning about her through how Carol feels about her after her death, for the most part. I think what sticks out in this is that the entire time Carol's not happy. And a lot of this episode, and arguably the last episode, were about the hive mind trying to give Carol whatever she wants to make her happy. But it's very clear that Carol's never been very good at just being happy. That she's always dissatisfied. She's complaining about the weird room. Why aren't we just staying at a normal hotel? She's not that impressed at the Northern Light. She calls it a screensaver. Like, she's very cynical. She's very jaded. She's not really phased. Helen's really trying to give her things she wants. And ironically, it's not all that different to Zosha and the hive mind trying to give her what she wants in the present part of the story. So I think that's maybe an interesting thing. There's obviously another reason why this scene is shown here that comes back up later in the episode, but I thought that was a really intriguing kind of snippet to show that it wasn't just recently on the book tour that Carol was kind of jaded, unhappy, because I think this was like 3,000 days ago, or 4,000 days ago, maybe even, something like that. This was years ago. And she's still pretty unhappy. Like, you know, was she ever, like, when has she ever been happy? It's hard to tell based on what we've seen. So I think they're intentionally showing us that. I think that's a big thing. I think the other big thing I was getting from this episode, particularly when Carol starts complaining about them accessing Helen's memories and saying, you do not use her memories. You never remember her again. Never use any information that you got from her. Never talk about her ever again. She makes that threat early on over the phone, particularly when they deliver like a breakfast that she had with Helen years ago on a vacation. And obviously it comes back up at the end when she eventually does sit and have a drink with Zosha, when Zosha delivers the hand grenade, where the title of the episode comes from. And she's basically, the way she complains about them, how like they know everything and they can pull information from anyone who's ever lived, and it's all these like, you know, admittedly, like obviously recorded history has mostly been written down. If you, the last 150 years, maybe there's some visual material of some kind, you know, more so video once you get to the last like 60 or whatever. You know, like this idea that they're pulling from everything, it really made something click in my head during this particular scene when she was complaining about it and how it wasn't real, it wasn't individual. She's critiquing that everything's always perfect in their little hive mind because they probably always imagine that they're in like a coffee commercial, or they're walking on a perfect beach, or they're doing this or doing that. I kind of got something else this show might be talking about, and I didn't really think about this in the first 2 episodes, but the hive mind is kind of AI. Like, not literally a computer, but like when you think of generative AI and the debates we're having in the real world now about AI art using other art that exists to just create a new amalgamation of it. This idea that if everyone's part of a hive mind and everyone just knows everything, they're just pulling information from each other as one big pool, it's like an AI just searching a database as opposed to a person with experiences, with feelings, with something they want to express. So I think that's interesting. And as much as it's like a running thing throughout the episode that Carol's watching the Golden Girls and like she's just watching her DVDs and she's trying to ignore the world for the most part, it is kind of interesting that, you know, she's watching something that is effectively art, right? I know it's weird to call a sitcom art, but, you know, they are, right? In a sense. Like, these characters she's watching, to her, are more real than the other people that are in her world now. Because at least someone created them. Someone put the words in their mouths and had something they wanted to say with these episodes and with these stories that they're telling. There's something to that. Whereas everything from the hive mind is just, no matter what she asks for, they just present it with no question, with no debate. It's just kind of like an automated response. There's no passion or heart in it. It's quite soulless in a weird way. Even if they're well-intentioned, even if they mean the best that they possibly could with a smile on their face, to an individual it feels kind of soulless because it just feels like a system responding to a request as opposed to another person giving you a gift, another person caring about your well-being, your feelings, whatever it may be. Which is why, you know, I think Carol, like, this realization that they gave her a real grenade, and she doubts it, of course, she's drunk as well, but she pulls the pin out, and Zosha's like, Carol, be careful with that, and you wouldn't give me a real grenade, and then like the clip bit like flicks off of it, and she's like, oh no. So Zosha gets injured at the end, sort of diving to kind of protect Carol, and Carol does show some concern that she's been hurt. So she doesn't accidentally kill millions of people this episode, but she might have killed the one unit that's got a friendly face that's been trying to kind of interact with her the most. And she has this scene at the end of the episode with, I mean, it's actually like no, it wasn't FedEx, it was another shipping company, but the guy in the uniform comes out as if he's the doctor and says, hey, Zosha's doing okay, she's had a concussion, some, you know, nothing too serious, she'll be fine, we'll just keep an eye on her, kind of thing. And Carol quite rightly says, why would you give me a real grenade? And he's like, you asked for a grenade. And she's like, wait, so if I asked for a bazooka, you'd give me that? Yep. If I asked for a tank, would you give me that? And he's like, yep. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to take this to the most extreme thing possible. What if I ask for an atom bomb? And it's interesting that this actually does give the hive mind some pause. When this unit, right? Because I say he and him or her when I'm talking about specific people responding to her, they're all part of the one hive mind. It's really them in general, but you know, obviously I'm seeing a man or a woman, so I'm just kind of jumping between all the pronouns. But he does kind of pause a little bit here. He clearly doesn't like the idea of giving one of the humans that are remaining individuals an atomic weapon, a nuclear bomb. And she's like, hey, stop dancing around it. Yes or no? Because he's like, no, we'd weigh it up. We'd talk to you. We'd try and explain to you why that would be dangerous. And she's like, yes, but would you ultimately give it if I really wanted it? And he says yes. And then very nervously asks, do you want an atom bomb? And it's probably the funniest moment of the episode for me is the way this guy delivers the line, do you want an atom bomb? It's actually quite funny. And she doesn't even let him off the hook by saying, no, I definitely don't. She says, I'll get back to you. Like, she gives him a little sarcastic kind of, I'll think about it kind of answer. I'll think about if I want an atomic bomb. Thank you very much. And it did kind of make me immediately go, wait, there's a dozen other people. Does that mean technically we could end up in some sort of Cold War where they all want to launch nukes against each other? I mean, I don't think it's actually going to go down that path, but it's funny to think that it could. We could go down that path. Carol's effectively the entire United States. In fact, I don't even think there was any Canadians, or was there any Mexicans in the group? I don't know if there was. She might be representing the entire continent of North America at this point. Like, she's the she's the lone person from that part of the world. So yeah, I mean, this was a good ending, and I think her response to this, where she just sort of goes, it's like she's finally starting to kind of process and not be surprised anymore. I feel like this episode was all about her going through the final stages of her being surprised at everything that they're going to give her, and maybe now she's going to start thinking a little bit outside the box of what to ask for, about how to try and pose problems to them. Because the whole thing when she's talking to Zosha, she's asking, like, you know, why are you doing this? You're kind of hypocritical. Like, you're saying that I've got free will. You're saying that it's, you know, everything's my choice. But until it's not, when you've cracked the solution to making sure I can assimilate with everyone else, I've lost all that control and I become part of the hive. Like, you're not giving me a choice in that. You're saying that I have free will until I don't. So this illusion of free will is something I was bringing up in the last couple episodes. But I feel like one of the things she might try and do is break their logic in some way. I feel like she's going to pose some problems to them, like pose some hypotheticals, or even like set up things that they have to make some kind of choice on. You know, Zosha says, oh, you would throw in like a life, you know, preserver or something to someone who was drowning, right? You throw them some help. That's what we're doing for you, for humanity, where we're helping everyone. We're more efficient. So I think like this is her sort of kind of coming to terms. Like, obviously there's a lot of shock value to her. She's still, you know, and obviously I feel like some people might critique that she's still surprised a lot of this episode, but I would like to defend that and say that, like, I get why it would take a while to fully process this new scenario she's in. I think it would be far too quick for her to be completely like over it by the end of episode 1 and be like, oh, I know how this world works now, I'm going to start messing with it and like seeing what I can get away with. I think I like that it's taking an extra episode after episode 2 to build to that point where she has this little realization at the end. Now, the exact realization she has is left to be determined, but I think the performance kind of gives you enough of it to understand that she's realizing how this works now, and maybe she's going to start thinking about how can she work within their rules that they have established to try and affect some kind of change or something. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the character kind of growth by the end of this episode. Now, I have glossed over a big section in the middle with the supermarket, the Sprouts, which I have to admit, I did not know that was the name of the store at first. We do not have Sprouts here. I've never heard of this store. I assume it's a real thing, mainly just because lots of other real stores and restaurants and stuff like that have been in this show already, with lots of real logos and things. So I assume it's a real supermarket chain in the US. But when she first said, "You've taken my Sprouts away, I want my Sprouts," I thought she was just talking about Brussels sprouts, and I thought, really? That's the thing you're missing here? But obviously the plot line here is that she wants to be independent. She doesn't want to rely on them to deliver food, so she goes to the supermarket. only to find that it's completely empty, like clean empty. Like there's not a trace of food anywhere in any of the shelves, and she stands there. If I have one little critique, there's like all the wide shot looked normal to me, but there's like one close up of her face where the background shelving looked like it was green screened. And it was both here and later on when the shelves were all full again, it looked green screen again in the exact same kind of shot. It was a close up of her face. I don't know if it was just the lighting being kind of weird and it was giving it that kind of effect, or if part of how they accomplished this of having the store completely empty and then completely full, there was some trickery involved maybe, and just a little bit of green screen work kind of was sticking out to me. It's not a big deal, like it's not a huge complaint. It's just something minor I noticed, because the reason why it stuck out is because the show typically looks fantastic. It looks very confident, everything, and the staging, the choreography of the camera movements. And in the case of this show in particular, the choreography of the hive mind. Like, the whole thing here when she calls up and says she wants her store back, will it be back by Friday? And Zosha's like, we'll be there in a minute. And all these trucks pull in and sort of like drive in like a synchronized unison of going into each side of the car park. And then just dozens, if not hundreds of people just swarm out of the sides of the town to come and help just fill the shelves. It only takes about 40 minutes or something like that. We cut to the end and the place is full. It's like it's stocked of everything. And she gets to just grab a trolley and go shopping. Although probably doesn't have to pay, I imagine, because I don't think that matters anymore. I think it's interesting that I was kind of expecting a scene where she called them back and said, hey, I'm never going to personally use everything in this store. A lot of this fruit and bread and, you know, the perishables, they're going to go bad. I'm not going to be able to take them all. You've stocked the whole place as if the entire city's going to come and use it. I can. So, you know, maybe come and use some of it yourselves, right? Or something. Because the idea is that they've emptied all the supermarkets because they can be more efficient than that. They can just make sure food and resources get to the people who need them as they need them, because everyone's a hive mind, right? They don't have to go shopping when they've got time in the same way that people do. And that's a fun idea. It makes sense. But I was wondering about the idea of waste here, and the idea that if they're going to stock a whole supermarket for one person to have their shopping experience, quote unquote, how much of that food is just getting wasted if they don't themselves come and use some of it before it goes out of date? that was something that popped out in my head as I was watching. And I was wondering if Carol was going to have that same kind of thought or realization. She didn't as of yet. Which is not to say that I don't think she's critical of how nonchalant they are about all their resources and how they waste certain things. And that's the thing, they don't actually waste certain things. They're very efficient. In fact, we see later on in the episode, they turn off the power to most of the city, but they keep like just Carol Street on, right? Because the power goes out for a minute, it comes back on for her, but the rest of the city's completely dark. And it's like, hey, yeah, the rest of the city doesn't need power. The only people who need lights at this time are the essential workers who are doing things like hospital work, you know, maintenance of the water treatment and things like that. Like, all the regular people can just sleep at night. It's all very efficient, and there's no need for this waste of energy and resources just to stay up and watch TV or whatever normal people do. So Carol is also frustrated by that. And I actually loved how much of a recurring thing her watching Golden Girls was in this. Now, I've never seen Golden Girls, but I know enough about it to recognize it when I see it. And I love that there's several sequences of her watching it, going back to it, pausing it, and the DVD screensaver comes on. There was just a lot of like, it was like a recurring beat throughout the episode, is that she keep trying to go back to watching her box sets of Golden Girls. It felt like a really like real human kind of thing. Like, it felt like a really normal person thing to do, is like, I'm just going to sit it out and watch some TV shows that I like, and hopefully this all blows over, or I just want to ignore what's going on in the world, or whatever it may be. But no, I did like the supermarket scene is very good. It felt like the big showy scene of the episode. Obviously, the grenade was obviously a nice fun moment as well. It was probably the one time in the episode where the surround sound really had something to do and kicked in. I mean, to be fair, it's usually good with the music as well, to be fair. But like, in terms of like actual oomph of an explosion or something, that was kind of the one time it did something like that. But yeah, no, I continue to really enjoy Rhea Seehorn's performance. I think that the frustration here and this relatability to the character who's flawed, you know, like she seems to be an alcoholic. She seems to have like had trouble being happy her entire life, from the glimpses that we've seen so far, certainly in her adulthood life anyway. And I think she's still very likable and relatable, and you understand why she's feeling the way she is, but you can be kind of like a third party and kind of critique her a little bit and see where her faults are and what she might learn about herself throughout this experience with these invaders, if we want to call them. And again, they're technically not invaders, they're technically just all the people have merged together, you know? It's kind of unique. It's kind of cool when like a unique sci-fi idea comes along where all of the terms that we normally use for this type of story don't really apply because it's technically kind of different. I like that. I like that because it means that there is a true, genuine difference to it. And it does play out, you know, every time she's talking to someone else from the hive mind, you have to effectively remember she's talking to the same person or the same mass of people, effectively. And that's everyone, aside from like 12 or 13 other people. So, no. So the premise is still settling in, of course, and I think this episode is a lot about still settling into the rules of this premise and seeing how the world functions, and Carol, along with us, the audience, getting used to what it is now. Like, yeah, we got the basic idea down from the first couple of episodes, but this kind of like just reaffirms a lot of it and starts to make it feel like the new normal. And okay, if this is the new normal, what do we then do with that normal? And I think that's what's going through Carol's head by the end of this episode. So the other thing, of course, with the ice hotel, or whatever you want to call it, from the opening, is that's what gets brought up right before Carol uses the grenade, is that Zosha says that when Carol's given all these examples of perfect moments or memories that they all probably can remember together, she brings up the ice hotel, and she gets mad and says, I told you that Helen's off limits. And this is an interesting detail, actually, because there was a moment in the middle of the episode where they seemed to know something, and Carol got pissed that, oh, I told you not to listen to or look at Helen's memories again or bring her up. And they say that, no, there was someone else there, like whoever like delivered the food or whatever it was. We know it from another person who was there, not her. Right? They sort of pointed that out. They made that clear. But here, Zosha does not rebuttal this in any way. She doesn't say that it was the guy that showed them to their room or anything like that. She just kind of looks back at her and smiles. And it pisses Carol off, which is what leads to her picking up the grenade. But I do think it's interesting that we're kind of pushing and testing if everything they say about themselves and how they're going to act, or if there's inconsistencies in their actions. Is there any hypocrisy going on with the hive mind? Is it simply that they just cannot ignore one of the minds that they merged with, so they can't just... I mean, maybe they could not bring it up. They could choose not to bring it up, and the hive mind here chose to bring up a Helen memory, full well knowing that Carol wouldn't like it, which I don't necessarily think they've got sinister intentions other than just having everyone merge with them, which they clearly think is a good thing. But it was definitely the one moment in this episode, and arguably the one moment in the last couple of episodes, aside from episode 1 where it seemed kind of like it was villainous for most of the episode, is that it was the one time in this episode where I felt like, maybe there is something more that you're hiding, kind of thing. Maybe there is like something here where you're being goody-good to a point, and you're being friendly as possible to a point, but there's maybe something else going on here. And I don't necessarily think it's just a traditional sense of they're lying and pretending because they're evil, or because they've got an evil master plan or something, but just that there's maybe something more to it than what they've presented to Carol, and by proxy us, the audience. So anyway, I think it's an interesting thing to think about, is that it's the one time where they seem to like not follow her request was when she brought up the Helen memory. So I think that's worth thinking about a little bit. But there you go. That's my thoughts on episode 3 of Pluribus Grenade. 3 of 9, I believe. So we got 6 more of these bad boys to see for the rest of the season. And I'm excited to see what we do next time. And the episode went in super quick as well. Like, I mean, all Vince Gilligan shows do. Like, this was the same with Better Call Saul, I remember, is just like feeling like the episode just melted away. I mean, this was a little bit shorter. You know, the other two I think were closer to a full hour. This one's like 43 minutes, I think. So, you know, regardless, really good episode. Excited to see what we do going forward. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. Of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thanks to everyone who already does. So that is my review of Pluribus. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?